In the fog-draped streets of 1930s London, a scream pierces the chaos of Guy Fawkes' night, leading Hercule Poirot to a chilling discovery. Laura Grayson found dead in her elegant mews flat, a revolver in her hand, a mirror reflecting her final moments. Was it suicide, or a cunning murder masked by fireworks? As Poirot unravels a web of hidden affairs, jealous hearts, and stolen naval secrets, every clue from a spilled wine glass to a cryptic diary points to a killer hiding in plain sight. In a world of love, betrayal, and espionage, only Poirot's grey cells can restore order to the shadows of Mews Lane. Chapter 1. The Fireworks of Faith. A crisp November air carried the acrid tang of gunpowder as London revelled in the chaos of Guy Fawkes' night. 1937. The sky above Mayfair erupted in cascades of scarlet, gold, and emerald, each burst punctuating the night with a jubilant roar. Hercule Poirot, the diminutive Belgian detective with a penchant for precision, navigated the crowded pavements with his characteristic fastidiousness. His patent leather shoes gleamed under the street lamps, and his meticulously groomed mustache quivered slightly as he adjusted his Homburg hat against the chill. Beside him, Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the enthusiastic companion, craned his neck to admire the pyrotechnic spectacle. "I say, Poirot, isn't it marvelous? The way these fireworks transform the sky, it's like a painting come to life." His boyish grin betrayed a delight that contrasted sharply with Poirot's measured demeanor. "Oui, mon ami," Poirot replied, his voice a soft cadence beneath the din. "The fireworks, they are indeed a spectacle. But often, it is in the brilliance of such displays that the shadows conceal their secrets." His green eyes, sharp as cut glass, scanned the bustling street, noting the revelers in their overcoats and scarves, their faces illuminated by fleeting bursts of light. The pair had been dining at a discreet little restaurant in Soho, where Poirot had expounded on the virtues of a perfectly prepared soufflé au chocolat. Now, as they strolled toward Poirot's flat, their path took them through a quieter corner of Mayfair, where the elegant facades of Georgian townhouses gave way to a charming mews. Once stables for the gentry's horses, these cobbled lanes now housed fashionable flats, their windows aglow with the warmth of electric lights. As they passed Mews Lane, a narrow alley flanked by neatly painted doors, a sharp, unmistakable scream sliced through the festive clamor. It was a sound of raw terror, abrupt and chilling, emanating from a second-floor window at No. 14. The light from the flat spilled onto the cobblestones below, flickering as if disturbed by some unseen movement. Hastings froze, his hand instinctively reaching for a revolver he no longer carried. "Good heavens, Poirot! That was no firework." "Nan, Hastings," Poirot said, his tone now brisk with purpose. "That was the cry of a soul in distress. Come, we must act." With surprising agility for a man of his fastidious nature, Poirot led the way across the mews, his cane tapping a determined rhythm on the stones. Hastings followed, his longer strides barely keeping pace as they ascended the narrow staircase to the second floor. The door too flat to be stood slightly ajar, a sliver of light escaping into the dim hallway. Poirot pushed it open with the tip of his cane, revealing a scene that halted both men in their tracks. A young woman, her auburn hair cascading over a green velvet dress, lay slumped across a mahogany writing desk, her right hand loosely clasped a small revolver, its barrel glinting in the lamplight. A dark, crimson stain marred her temple, and the air held the faint, metallic scent of blood mingled with the sharper note of gunpowder. Hastings, his face palling, stepped forward and gently pressed his fingers to the woman's wrist. "She's dead, Poirot," he said, his voice heavy. "Poor girl, it looks like she took her own life." Poirot's eyes, however, were already darting about the room, cataloging every detail with the precision of a watchmaker. The flat was small, but tastefully furnished, a chintz-covered armchair, a bookshelf laden with novels, a vase of wilting chrysanthemums on a side table. A glass of red wine lay overturned on the floor, its contents pooling like a second wound on the Persian rug. Beside the woman's hand, a sheet of notepaper bore a few scrawled lines, the ink still glistening as if freshly written. "Suicide, you say, Hastings?" Poirot murmured, crouching to examine the spilled wine. "Perhaps. But the little grey cells, they protest. Observe, mon ami, the glass is spilled, yet the bottle on the table remains upright. Why does one about to end their life pour a drink only to waste it? And this letter, why is it begun but not finished?" He straightened, his gaze settling on the revolver. "And this weapon, it is not the sort a lady might choose. It is heavy, unwieldy, most curious." He turned to the window, which was firmly shut, its latch secure. Beyond it the fireworks continued their relentless dance, casting fleeting shadows across the room. Hastings rubbed his chin. Perhaps she was interrupted, or changed her mind at the last moment. Poirot's lips curved into a faint, enigmatic smile. Or perhaps, Hastings, someone wished it to appear so. "We must learn who this lady was and what secrets she carried to her grave. For in this muse, I suspect, the fireworks conceal a far darker explosion." Chapter 2. The scene of the crime, the narrow staircase of No. 14 Mews Lane creaked under the weight of purposeful steps as Hercule Poirot and Captain Arthur Hastings stood before the open door of Flat to Be. The festive clamor of Guy Fawkes' night still echoed faintly from the streets of Mayfair, but within the small flat, an oppressive silence reigned, broken only by the soft ticking of a mantel clock. The air was thick with the mingled scents of gunpowder, blood, and spilled wine, a tableau of tragedy. Frozen in time, Poirot's sharp green eyes surveyed the room with the precision of a jeweler inspecting a flawed gem. The young woman, identified by a neighbor as Miss Laura Grayson, lay slumped over her mahogany writing desk, her auburn hair fanning across the polished surface like spilled ink. Her right hand loosely gripped a heavy revolver, its barrel catching the lamplight in a cold, metallic glint. A single bullet wound marred her temple, the blood now congealing into a dark halo. Beside her, a sheet of notepaper bore a few trembling lines, the fountain pen still resting where it had fallen from her fingers. A glass of red wine, overturned on the Persian rug, had left a crimson stain that mirrored the wound detail. That struck Poirot as both poignant and suspicious. Hastings, his face drawn with the quiet horror of a man unaccustomed to such intimate encounters with death, stood back, his hands clasped tightly behind him. "It's a grim sight, Poirot," he said, his voice low. "She can't have been more than 30. To end it like this, it's tragic." "Tragic," Poirot replied, his tone measured, but laced with a subtle intensity. "But is it truly as it seems, mon ami? The little grey cells, they are restless. They see order where others see despair, and they question what appears evident." He stepped closer to the desk, his small frame moving with a deliberate grace, as if each movement were part of a choreographed dance. He crouched beside the spilled wine glass, his gloved fingers hovering just above the rug. "Observe, Hastings. The wine, it is spilled, yet the bottle on the table remains untouched, upright, its cork firmly in place. Why does a woman, in her final moments, pour herself a glass, only to let it fall? It is not the act of one resolved to die." Hastings frowned, his brow furrowing as he followed Poirot's gaze. Perhaps she was nervous, unsteady. People in that state might fumble things. Perhaps Poirot conceded, though his tone suggested skepticism. He straightened and turned his attention to the notepaper. The writing was hurried, the ink smudged in places, as if the writer had been interrupted or overcome by emotion. The words read, "My dearest, I cannot go on like this. The truth must." The sentence broke off abruptly. the pen leaving a jagged trail across the page. Poirot's mustache twitched. This letter, it is incomplete. Why does she stop? If it is a suicide note, why not finish her thoughts? And the words "the truth must," they suggest a revelation, not a farewell. He picked up the pen, examining its nib. The ink. It is still wet. This was written moments before her death. Before Hastings could respond, the sound of heavy boots announced the arrival of Inspector Japp, his familiar figure bustling into the room with the air of a man perpetually on the verge of exasperation. His overcoat was dusted with soot from the fireworks outside, and his round face was flushed from the November chill. Behind him trailed a young constable, clutching a notebook with an air of nervous diligence. "Well, Poirot, you've beaten me to it again," Japp said, his voice a mix of resignation and grudging respect. "Got a call from a neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, lives downstairs. Heard the scream and thought it was more than just fireworks. Looks like a straightforward case, though. Poor girl shot herself. Name's Laura Grayson, 28, lived here alone. Worked as a typist for some publishing outfit in Bloomsbury." Poirot inclined his head, his expression unreadable. "Straightforward, you say, Inspector, and yet the revolver is a curious choice for a Lady Nan. It is heavy, masculine, not the sort one keeps in a delicate drawer. And the angle of the wound?" He leaned closer to Laura's body, his eyes narrowing as he studied the entry point at her temple. "It is slightly upward, not quite as one would expect from a self-inflicted shot." Japp raised an eyebrow, accustomed to Poirot's penchant for finding complications where none seemed to exist. "Come now, Poirot, don't go making mountains out of molehills. No signs of a struggle. Door was locked when Mrs. Higgins tried it, and the windows shut tight. Suicide, plain as day." "Plain, perhaps, to the eyes," Poirot murmured, "but not to the mind." He stepped back, his gaze sweeping the room once more. The flat was small but meticulously kept, its furnishings reflecting a modest yet refined taste. A bookshelf held an assortment of novels, Dickens, Bronte, and a few modern thrillers, while a vase of chrysanthemums, their petals beginning to droop, stood on a side table. A single armchair, upholstered in faded chintz, faced a small fireplace, where embers glowed faintly. Above the desk hung a small, ornate mirror, its gilded frame catching the light in a way that seemed almost deliberate. Poirot paused before the mirror, tilting his head as if consulting an old friend. "This mirror, it is oddly placed. It reflects the desk, but not the door. Why position it so? It is not for vanity, I think." Hastings, attempting to follow Poirot's train of thought, ventured, "Maybe she'd like to see herself while she worked. Women do that sort of thing, don't they?" Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "You are charmingly predictable, Hastings. But no, this mirror serves another purpose. Perhaps it allowed someone to see without being seen." He turned to the window, its heavy curtains drawn back to reveal the darkened mews below. The latch was secure, as Japp had noted, but Poirot's fingers traced its edges with care. "The window is locked, but locks can be manipulated, and the fireworks such a convenient mask for a gunshot." Japp snorted, crossing his arms. "You're suggesting someone shot her from outside, through a closed window? That's a stretch, even for you, Poirot." "Not through the glass, Inspector," Poirot corrected gently. "The window could have been opened and closed again. We must examine the frame for signs of tampering." He beckoned to the constable, who scrambled to obey. Though his inspection revealed nothing obvious, Poirot's attention returned to the desk. Beside the notepaper lay a small appointment book, its pages marked with neat, feminine handwriting. He flipped through it, noting engagements for teas, theater visits, and meetings with initials, PM, ECDF. Miss Grayson, she was a social creature, Nan. These initials, they may lead us to those who knew her best. Japp nodded, jotting down the initials in his own notebook. Right, we'll round up her friends. Mrs. Higgins mentioned a few regulars who visited Mrs. Evelyn Carter, a widow, Mr. Philip Marlowe, a barrister, and Miss Diana Fielding, an artist. I'll have them brought in tomorrow. Excellent, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming with the anticipation of a puzzle taking shape. But we must also consider Miss Grayson's profession. A typist for a publishing firm, perhaps she handled documents of importance. Secrets, they are often the currency of death. Hastings, warming to the investigation, leaned forward. You think this could be more than a personal tragedy? Something sinister? Poirot's gaze was distant, as if seeing beyond the walls of the flat. Sinister, oui. The heart, it can kill for love or jealousy, but the mind it kills for secrets. We must learn what Miss Grayson knew, and who wished that knowledge silenced. The constable, hovering nervously, cleared his throat. Sir, there's something else. Mrs. Higgins said she saw Miss Grayson earlier today, looking agitated. Kept glancing out the window, like she was expecting someone. Poirot's mustache twitched again, a sign Hastings recognized as the stirring of his friend's formidable intellect. Agitated, you say? And expecting a visitor. This is most interesting. We must speak with this Mrs. Higgins at once. The neighbor, a stout woman in her 60s, with a penchant for gossip, was waiting in the hallway, her hands wringing a lace handkerchief. Her eyes widened at the sight of Poirot, whose reputation had evidently preceded him. Oh, Mr. Poirot, it's dreadful. Poor Miss Grayson, such a lively young thing. I heard the scream, clear as day, right after a big firework went off. I tried the door, but it was locked, so I called the police. Poirot's questions were gentle but incisive. Madame, this agitation you observed at Miss Grayson, mention a name, a reason for her unease. Mrs. Higgins shook her head, her curls bobbing. Not a name, sir, but she did say something odd this morning. I was sweeping the steps, and she came out to collect her post. She said, Mrs. Higgins, sometimes the truth is a heavier burden than a lie. I didn't know what she meant, but she looked ever so pale. Poirot nodded, filing the remark away. And this visitor she expected, did you see anyone approach? The flat? No, sir, but it was dark. And with all the fireworks, I wasn't paying much mind, only saw her silhouette in the window, writing at her desk, just before the scream. Thank you, madame, Poirot said, bowing slightly. You have been most helpful. As Mrs. Higgins retreated, Japp clapped his hands together. Right, Poirot, I'll have the body taken for examination, and the flat sealed. We'll start with the friends tomorrow. But I'm telling you, this looks like a woman who couldn't face the world anymore. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. The world, Inspector, is full of appearances. But Hercule Poirot, he seeks the truth beneath them, and in this muse, the truth is not what it seems. As they descended the stairs, the fireworks outside reached a crescendo, their brilliance casting long shadows across the cobbles. Hastings glanced at Poirot, whose face was a mask of concentration. You really think it's murder, don't you? He asked. Poirot paused, his cane tapping lightly against the ground. I think, Hastings, that Miss Laura Grayson was a woman. With secrets, someone was desperate to keep buried. And for that, she paid with her life. The night swallowed them as they stepped into the mews. The echoes of celebration now a stark contrast to the mystery unfolding within the quiet walls of No. 14. Chapter 3. The shadows of secrets. The morning following the grim discovery at No. 14 Mews Lane dawned grey and damp. The festive exuberance of Guy Fawkes' night, replaced by a heavy mist that clung to the cobblestones of Mayfair. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in a tailored overcoat and polished shoes, sat in the private parlor of a discreet café just off the Mews, his small hands folded neatly before a cup of steaming tisane. The aroma of chamomile did little to soften the sharpness in his green eyes, which gleamed with the restless energy of a mind at work. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever his faithful shadow, occupied the chair opposite, his expression a mixture of curiosity and unease as he stirred a cup of rather indifferent tea. "Poirot," Hastings ventured, glancing toward the rain-streaked window, "do you really think there's more to this than meets the eye? Jap seems convinced it's a straightforward case. Poor Miss Grayson, driven to despair, perhaps by a broken heart." Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of his disagreement. "Mon ami, the heart, it may break, but it does not always pull the trigger. The scene we witnessed last night is a stage, carefully set. The spilled wine, the unfinished letter, the mirror's curious angle, these are not the props of despair, but of deception." He sipped his tisane, his gaze distant. "We must look beyond the obvious, Hastings, to the shadows where secrets hide." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Inspector Japp, his rain-soaked mackintosh dripping onto the café's polished floor. With him came 3 individuals, each ushered into the parlor with the air of reluctant guests summoned to an unwelcome gathering. Japp, ever practical, had arranged for Laura Grayson's closest acquaintances to be questioned here, away from the prying eyes of the muse. "Morning, Poirot," Japp said, shaking water from his hat. "I've rounded up the lot, as promised. This is Mrs. Evelyn Carter, Mr. Philip Marlowe, and Miss Diana Fielding. They were Miss Grayson's regular visitors, according to the neighbor. Let's see what they've got to say." Poirot rose, his small stature commanding the room with an effortless authority. "Madame, Monsieur, I am Hercule Poirot. I thank you for coming on this melancholy occasion. The death of Miss Grayson, it is a tragedy, but I seek the truth behind it. May I ask you to share what you knew of her life?" The first to speak was Mrs. Evelyn Carter, a widow of 35 whose vivacious beauty was tempered by a nervous energy. Her blonde hair was swept into an elegant chignon, and her silk scarf, twisted repeatedly in her hands, betrayed her unease. Laura was radiant, she said, her voice bright but brittle, like glass on the verge of shattering, always hosting little gatherings, full of laughter. She loved life, Mr. Poirot. I can't imagine why she'd... Her words trailed off, and she dabbed at her eyes with the scarf. Though no tears were visible, Poirot's gaze was gentle but unyielding. "And yet, madame, even the most radiant lives may hide shadows. Did Miss Grayson confide in you? Perhaps a trouble of the heart, or a fear?" Evelyn's fingers tightened on the scarf. "She was private about some things. We all are, aren't we? But no, nothing specific. She seemed her usual self the last time we met 3 days ago, at a tea shop in Bloomsbury." Poirot nodded, turning to the next figure. Mr. Philip Marlowe, a barrister in his early 40s, cut a striking figure with his sharp jawline and immaculate suit. His dark eyes held a flicker of impatience, as if the proceedings were an unwelcome interruption to his meticulously ordered life. "Laura was a friend," he said, his tone clipped, "charming, if a bit impulsive. We'd known each other for years, but I'm a busy man, Mr. Poirot. I didn't pry into her personal affairs." "And yet," Poirot said, his voice soft as velvet, "friends often know more than they realize. Did she speak of any plans, monsieur? A journey, perhaps, or a change in her circumstances?" Marlowe's lips thinned. "She mentioned wanting to travel Paris, I think, but nothing out of the ordinary. If she was troubled, she kept it to herself." The third figure, Miss Diana Fielding, sat slightly apart, her slender frame hunched as if to make herself smaller. A painter by trade, her dark eyes were shadowed with fatigue, and her hands, stained faintly with traces of charcoal, trembled slightly. She was younger than the others, perhaps 27, with an air of quiet intensity that contrasted with Evelyn's vivacity and Marlowe's aloofness. "Laura was my dearest friend," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. We met at an art exhibition 2 years ago. She was kind, generous. If she was unhappy, she never showed it to me." Poirot's eyes lingered on her, noting the slight quiver in her voice. "Mademoiselle, you are an artist. You observe the world closely, Nan. Did you notice Sistine? Notice anything in her manner, her hands, her eyes?" Diana's pale cheeks flushed faintly. I suppose she seemed a bit distracted lately. Her eyes would dart about sometimes, as if she were looking for someone, but I thought it was just her lively nature." Poirot inclined his head, his expression unreadable. "Most interesting. And these distractions, did they involve anyone in particular?" Diana hesitated, her fingers twisting together. "I don't know. She didn't say, but she was secretive. Sometimes she'd laugh it off, but I could tell something was on her mind." Jap, standing by the door, cleared his throat. "Right, that's enough for now. We'll need formal statements at the station later, but Mr. Poirot's got his questions, and I've got a crime scene to wrap up." As the trio filed out, Evelyn's scarf trailing like a flag of distress, Marlowe's strides brisk and purposeful, Diana's steps slow and hesitant, Poirot turned to Hastings. "What do you make of them, mon ami?" Hastings rubbed his chin. "Mrs. Carter's a bit theatrical. Isn't she? Marlowe's cold as ice, and Miss Fielding, well, she's a nervous wreck. Hard to say who's hiding what." "Precisely," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "Each carries a secret, Hastings. The widow, she hides her fear behind charm. The barrister, his detachment is a shield, and the artist, her heart is heavy with something unspoken. We must uncover what lies beneath." Jap rejoined them, his notebook tucked away. "I've got men searching the flat for anything out of place, no signs of forced entry yet, but we'll keep looking." "What's your next move, Poirot?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The next move, Inspector, is to follow the shadows. Miss Grayson's life was a tapestry of secrets, and someone has cut its threads. We shall find out why." As they left the cafe, the rain had softened to a drizzle, and the mews lay quiet under the gray sky. Hastings glanced at Poirot, whose face was a mask of concentration. "You're certain it's murder, then?" "Certain, Hastings." Poirot's voice was soft, almost wistful. "I am certain of nothing but this. The truth is a shadow that moves when the light of inquiry falls upon it. And Hercule Poirot, he will chase that shadow until it stands still." Chapter 4. The Hidden Affair. The drizzle that had cloaked Mayfair in a somber veil persisted into the afternoon, casting a muted pallor over the elegant streets as Hercule Poirot and Captain Arthur Hastings made their way back to No. 14 Mews Lane. The cobbled alley, so recently alive with the echoes of fireworks, now seemed to hold its breath, as if guarding the secrets of the tragedy within. Poirot's small, precise steps echoed with purpose, his gloved hands clasped behind his back, while Hastings, ever the loyal companion, adjusted his hat against the damp and cast wary glances at the shuttered windows above. "Poirot, Hastings ventured, his voice low. "Those three we met, Mrs. Carter, Marlowe, Miss Fielding, they all seemed shaken, but none struck me as the murderous type. Do you really think one of them could have done it?" Poirot's green eyes flickered with a quiet intensity. "Mon ami, the heart is a labyrinth, and even the most innocent face may conceal a motive. The little gray cells, they tell me Miss Grayson's death was no act of despair, but a deliberate curtain drawn across a secret. We must find what that secret was." Inside Flat to B, the air was heavy with the lingering scent of tragedy. The police had cordoned off the room, but Poirot, with a nod from Inspector Jap, was granted access to continue his meticulous examination. The body of Laura Grayson had been removed to the coroner's care, leaving the desk bare save for the spilled wine stain on the rug, the unfinished letter, and the small appointment book Poirot had noted the previous night. The revolver, now in police custody, had left an invisible weight in the room. Its absence as telling as its presence had been. Poirot's gaze settled on the appointment book, its leather cover worn from frequent use. He opened it with care, his fingers tracing the neat feminine handwriting. The entries were a tapestry of Laura's life. Luncheons with Evelyn Carter, theater outings with Diana Fielding, and, most intriguingly, several meetings marked simply with the initials PM. Poirot's mustache twitched as he flipped to the most recent pages. These initials, Hastings PM, they appear frequently, and yet Mr. Philip Marlowe, he claimed only a casual friendship. Most curious. Hastings peered over Poirot's shoulder. You think Marlowe's hiding something? He was awfully curt yesterday, like he didn't want to be there. Precisement, Poirot said, closing the book with a soft snap. The man who is too busy to speak often has the most to conceal. We shall pay Monsieur Marlowe a visit, but first, there is more to learn here. He moved to the bookshelf, its contents a mix of classic novels and modern romances, their spines well creased. From reading, tucked between a volume of Austen and a dog-eared mystery, was a small, locked diary, its brass clasp gleaming faintly. Poirot's eyes narrowed. This, Hastings, is not for casual reading. A diary, it is the keeper of secrets. With Japp's permission, a constable was summoned to pry open the lock, revealing pages filled with Laura's looping script. The entries were recent, spanning the past 6 months, and many were written in a cryptic shorthand that hinted at discretion. One passage, dated a week prior, caught Poirot's attention. Met him again tonight. He says we must be careful, but my heart cannot bear the silence. E knows, I'm sure of it. What will she do? Poirot's finger tapped the page. Him. E. These are clues. Hastings. The him, perhaps our barrister, Philip Marlowe, and E. Could this be Mrs. Evelyn Carter? The diary suggests a clandestine affair, one that someone feared exposed. Hastings frowned, his mind racing. An affair that could explain the tension we saw yesterday. If Marlowe was involved with Laura, and Mrs. Carter found out, it may lead to, well, something drastic. But we must not leap to conclusions, Poirot cautioned. The heart, it is a motive, but so too is fear. Let us see what Monsieur Marlowe reveals. The offices of Philip Marlowe, located in a stately building near Lincoln's Inn, were as austere as the man himself. The barrister received Poirot and Hastings in a wood-paneled study, his desk piled with legal briefs. His dark eyes were guarded, his posture rigid as he gestured for them to sit. Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, I've already told you what I know. Laura was a friend, nothing more. I'm a busy man, and this is a distressing interruption. Poirot's smile was disarming, but his gaze was sharp as a blade. Monsieur Marlowe, you are a man of precision, yet your memory, it is vague. Miss Grayson's diary suggests a closer connection. Meetings, late at night, marked with your initials. Perhaps you can enlighten us. Marlowe's jaw tightened, a flicker of unease crossing his face. Her diary, that's private. But if you must know, yes, Laura and I were engaged, secretly. We kept it quiet to avoid gossip. She was a typist, I'm a barrister. It wouldn't do for my reputation, but we argued recently. She wanted to announce our engagement, and I urged caution. That's all. Hastings leaned forward, his voice earnest. An argument. Could it have driven her to, you know? Marlowe's eyes flashed with irritation to take her own life. No, Captain. Laura was impulsive, but not desperate. If anything, she was defiant, determined to have her way. Poirot's fingers steepled before him. And this defiance, monsieur, did it concern another? The diary speaks of a man, a secret kept from others. Was there another in her heart? Marlowe's face darkened, but he shook his head. If there was, she never told me. Laura was passionate, Yes, but loyal. I'd stake my life on it. As they left Marlowe's office, the rain had thickened, drumming against their umbrellas. Hastings glanced at Poirot, whose expression was inscrutable. He's hiding something, isn't he? That engagement story doesn't quite add up. Nan, Hastings, Poirot said softly. It adds up, but not to the sum we expect. Marlowe. He is a man of pride, and pride conceals as much as it reveals. But there is another thread in this tapestry, the E. Who knew of the affair? We must speak with Mrs. Carter again. Their next stop was Evelyn Carter's elegant townhouse, a stone's throw from the Mews. The widow received them in a drawing-room adorned with chinoiserie and heavy drapes. Her silk scarf now replaced by a string of pearls she twisted nervously. Her smile was bright, but her eyes darted to the clock, as if wishing the interview over. Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, this is such a dreadful business, she said, her voice lilting but strained. Laura was like a sister to me. I can't believe she's gone. Poirot's gaze was gentle but unyielding. Madame, your friendship with Miss Grayson, it was close. Close enough to share secrets of the heart. Her diary suggests she feared someone knew of a hidden affair. And perhaps you. Evelyn's hand froze on her pearls, her smile faltering. Me, oh heavens, no. Laura was private, but we shared everything. If she had an affair, she'd have told me. As for this it could be anyone, Edith, Ellen, who knows? Poirot nodded, his expression giving nothing away. And the night of her death, Madame, you were at a party, I understand. Did you see Miss Grayson that day? Evelyn's eyes flickered. No, I was at a friend's house in Chelsea, a Guy Fawkes celebration. I didn't see Laura, but we spoke by telephone that morning. She sounded cheerful, as always. As they left the townhouse, Hastings whispered, She's nervous, Poirot. That business about the telephone called. Do you believe her? Poirot's lips curved faintly. The telephone, it is a convenient alibi, Hastings. But the diary, it does not lie. Mrs. Carter knows more than she says, and her fear, it is not only for Laura's death. Back at Poirot's flat, the detective sat by the fire, his fingers drumming lightly on the armrest. The affair, Hastings, it is the key. Laura Grayson loved, perhaps too freely, and someone Marlowe, Mrs. Carter, or another wished that. Love silenced. But there is more. The diary's cryptic words. The truth she could not bear. There is a shadow behind the heart, a shadow we must illuminate. Hastings settled into a chair, his mind racing. You think there's more to this than a lover's quarrel? Something bigger? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Always, mon ami, there is something bigger. The heart kills, but so does ambition, fear. Betrayal. We shall find the truth, Hastings, and it will be as intricate as the web of a spider. Outside, the rain continued to fall, shrouding the Mews in a veil of mystery as Poirot's gray cells wove their own intricate web, drawing ever closer to the hidden truth. Chapter 5. The misdirection of the mirror. The pale light of a late November afternoon filtered through the heavy curtains of No. 14 Mews Lane, casting long shadows across the floor of Laura Grayson's flat. Hercule Poirot stood motionless in the center of the room, his small frame a study in concentration, his green eyes fixed on the ornate mirror above the mahogany desk. The flat, now emptied of its tragic occupant, seemed to hold its secrets more tightly, as if the walls themselves conspired to obscure the truth. Captain Arthur Hastings, pacing near the window, broke the silence with a restless sigh. Poirot, we've been over this room a dozen times, he said, his voice tinged with impatience. The police have taken the revolver, the diaries with jab, and the neighbors saw nothing but fireworks. Are you sure we're not chasing shadows? Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. Shadows, mon ami. Nan, It is the shadows that will lead us to the light. This mirror. He gestured to the gilded frame, its surface reflecting the desk, with uncanny precision. It is no mere decoration. It is a player in this drama, and it has much to tell us. He stepped closer, his gloved fingers tracing the mirror's edge without touching it. The frame was delicate, its rococo flourishes at odds with the room's otherwise understated elegance. Positioned above the desk, it caught the lamplight and reflected the exact spot where Laura Grayson had been found. Her head slumped over the unfinished letter. Poirot tilted his head, his eyes narrowing as he considered the angle. "Observe, Hastings," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "The mirror, it does not face the door, nor the window directly. It is angled to reflect the desk and only the desk." Why such precision? A lady might place a mirror for vanity, to check her appearance, but this is for observation. Hastings frowned, crossing his arms. "You mean someone was watching her? From where?" "The door was locked, and the window was shut tight." Poirot replied, his tone carrying a hint of triumph. "The window, it is shut now, but what of before? The fireworks, they masked a sound, a shot, perhaps, but they also masked a presence. Come, let us test a theory." He moved to the window, its heavy sash frame unyielding under his careful inspection. The latch, as Inspector Japp had noted, was secure, but Poirot's fingers probed the wood, searching for signs of tampering. A faint scratch, barely visible, marred the sill near the latch, as if a tool had been used to pry it open. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Aha! The window, it has been persuaded, Hastings. Not forced, but coaxed by someone who knew how to leave little trace." Hastings leaned closer, squinting at the mark. "You think someone opened the window, shot Laura, and then locked it again? But how? They'd have to get inside to do that, and Mrs. Higgins said the door was locked when she tried it." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The door, oui, but the window, it is another matter. Suppose, mon ami, that the killer stood outside, in the mews. The mirror, it reflects the desk to the window, allowing one to see Laura's every move. A shot, timed with the fireworks, would go unheard. The killer enters, places the revolver in her hand, locks the window, and exits through the door, locking it behind them with a key." Hastings' eyes widened. "A key? You think the killer had a key to the flat?" "It is possible," Poirot said, pacing slowly. "Miss Grayson, she was a woman of secrets and affair, a diary, a life hidden from view. Someone close to her, someone trusted, could have such a key. Or perhaps it was taken, used, and returned." He paused before the desk, his gaze falling on the spilled wine stain, now darkened on the rug. "And this wine, Hastings, it troubles me. The glass is overturned, yet the bottle remains upright, half full. Why pour a drink only to waste it? It suggests surprise, interruption, a moment when death came unexpectedly." Hastings rubbed his chin, his mind grappling with the implications. "So you're saying the killer shot her from outside, through the open window, then came in to stage the scene as a suicide? That's devilishly clever." "Oui, clever indeed," Poirot agreed. "But cleverness, it leaves traces. The mirror, the window, the wine, they are the fingerprints of a mind that planned with care, but could not foresee every detail." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Inspector Japp, his face flushed from the damp chill outside. He carried a small evidence bag, which he placed on the side table with a sigh. "Poirot, you're still poking about. We've got the coroner's report, single gunshots to the temple, consistent with the revolver found in her hand. Powder residue on her fingers, too. Looks like suicide to me, but I know you'll argue." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Argy, Inspector." "Nan, I merely suggest. The residue, it can be placed on a hand after death, can it not? And the angle of the wound, did the coroner note its trajectory?" Japp frowned, flipping open his notebook. Upward, slightly. Odd, I'll grant you, but not impossible for a suicide. Not impossible, Poirot conceded, but improbable. The mirror, Inspector, it allowed someone to watch her from outside. The window, it bears a mark of tampering. This was no act of despair, but of calculation. Japp sighed, rubbing his temples. You and your theories, Poirot. All right, let's say you're right. Who's your suspect? That barrister Marlowe. He admitted to the engagement, but he's got an alibi working late in his chambers, confirmed by a clerk. Poirot's fingers steepled before him. An alibi, it is only as strong as its witness. Monsieur Marlowe, he has motive pride, perhaps, or fear of scandal. But there is also Mrs. Carter, who knew of an affair and fears its exposure. And Miss Fielding, whose heart carries a burden she does not speak. He turned back to the mirror, his reflection staring back with a clarity that seemed to mock the mystery. This mirror, it is the key. It was placed to watch, to ensure the moment was right. We must learn who stood in its line of sight. Hastings, warming to the puzzle, ventured a thought. What about the neighbor, Mrs. Higgins? She saw Laura at the window just before the scream. Could she have seen something else, someone in the mews? Poirot nodded approvingly. An excellent thought, Hastings. We shall speak with Madame Higgins again, but with precision. The mews, it is narrow, shadowed, easy to miss a figure in the dark, especially with the fireworks distracting the eye. They descended to the ground floor, where Mrs. Higgins, the stout neighbor, was sweeping the steps, despite the drizzle. Her eyes widened at the sight of Poirot, her broom pausing mid-sweep. Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings. Have you caught the villain? Yet? Not yet, Madame Poirot said, bowing slightly. But you perhaps can help us. Last night you saw Miss Grayson at her window. Did you notice anyone else in the mews? A figure perhaps lingering in the shadows? Mrs. Higgins clutched her broom, her face creasing with thought. Well, now you mention it, I did see someone, a tall figure, in a dark coat, standing near the lamppost across the way. I thought it was just a reveler, watching the fireworks, but they were gone when I looked again, right after the scream. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A tall figure, you say? Most interesting. And this lamp-post is visible from Miss Grayson's window? Oh yes, Mrs. Higgins said, nodding vigorously. Right in line with her flat. I often saw her looking out, like she was waiting for someone. Thank you, Madame, Poirot said, his voice warm but urgent. You have given us a thread to follow. As they walked back into the mews, Hastings glanced at Poirot. A tall figure could be Marlowe, couldn't it? He's tall enough, and that engagement business makes him a likely candidate. Perhaps, Poirot said, his tone cautious. But we must not assume. The figure could be another stranger, or someone we have yet to consider. The mirror, the window, the dark coat, they are pieces of a puzzle, and Hercule Poirot, he will fit them together. The drizzle had turned to a steady rain, cloaking the mews in a curtain of gray. Poirot paused, his gaze lingering on the window of flat to be, now dark and empty. The truth, Hastings, it is like this rain, persistent, elusive, but it will fall. And when it does, we shall see the face of a killer. Chapter 6. The espionage angle. The rain had relented by the following morning, leaving behind a damp chill that seemed to seep into the very stones of Mayfair. Hercule Poirot, impeccable in a charcoal overcoat and a neatly pinned cravat, stood outside the modest offices of Grayson and Holt, the publishing firm where Laura Grayson had worked as a typist. The building, tucked away in a quiet corner of Bloomsbury, was unassuming, its faded sign barely legible above the door. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever at Poirot's side, adjusted his scarf against the cold, his breath visible in the crisp air. Poirot, Hastings said, his voice tinged with skepticism, Do you really think Laura's work could have something to do with her death? She was just a typist, after all. Hardly the sort to be mixed up in anything sinister. Poirot's green eyes gleamed with a quiet certainty. Mon ami, it is often the most ordinary roles that conceal the most extraordinary secrets. Miss Grayson, she typed manuscripts. Oui, but what kind? Words? They can be weapons. Hastings, and a typist. She sees what others do not. We must learn what passed through her hands. The interior of Grayson and Holt was as unremarkable as its exterior, with cramped offices smelling of ink and old paper. Stacks of manuscripts teetered on desks, and a lone typewriter clicked intermittently in the background. Mr. Reginald Holt, the firm's senior partner, greeted them with a nervous air, his thin frame dwarfed by a heavy wool suit. His spectacles perched precariously on his nose, and his hands fidgeted with a fountain pen, as he ushered Poirot and Hastings into a cluttered office. Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, Holt began, his voice high and strained. This is a terrible shock. Laura was one of our best typists, striable, discreet. I can't imagine why anyone would. Well, you know. Poirot's smile was disarming, but his gaze was sharp as a blade. Monsieur Holt, I am Hercule Poirot, and I seek the truth. Behind Miss Grayson's death. Her work here, it was sensitive, Nan. Perhaps she typed documents of importance. Holt's fingers tightened on the pen, a faint tremor betraying his unease. Sensitive. Well, yes, I suppose. We handle all sorts novels, memoirs, and occasionally government reports. Nothing top secret, mind you, but some manuscripts require discretion. Laura was trusted with those. Poirot's mustache twitched. Trusted, you say? And yet, monsieur, a trusted typist may see things she should not. Did Miss Grayson ever mention concerns about her work? A document, perhaps, that troubled her. Holt hesitated, his eyes darting to the window as if expecting an eavesdropper. She did ask once about a report she was typing, something about naval plans, I think. She wondered why we were handling it, since it wasn't our usual fare. I told her it was a one-off, a favor for a client. She seemed satisfied. Hastings leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. Naval plans. That sounds like something that could attract the wrong kind of attention. Did she say anything else? Holt shook his head, but his unease was palpable. No, nothing specific. Laura was professional, kept to herself. If she was worried, she didn't let on. As they left the office, Poirot's expression was one of deep contemplation. Naval plans, Hastings. Most curious. I am reminded of a case, the incredible theft, where a staged robbery concealed espionage. Could it be that Miss Grayson stumbled upon something similar, a secret hidden in plain sight? Hastings frowned, his mind racing. Espionage. You think Laura was killed to keep her quiet about some government report. But who would benefit from that? Poirot's gaze was distant, as if seeing beyond the damp streets of Bloomsbury. Someone with access, Hastings. Someone who knew what she typed, and what it meant. We must return to the flat. There may be more clues we have overlooked. Back at No. 14 Mews Lane, the flat felt colder, its silence more oppressive without the bustle of police activity. Inspector Japp had left a constable on guard, but Poirot's presence was enough to grant them entry. The room was as they had left it, the mirror still angled to reflect the desk, the wine stain a dark reminder on the rug. Poirot moved to the bookshelf, his fingers brushing the spines as he searched for something out of place. Laura's diary mentioned the plans and a theft. He mused, his voice soft. If she typed sensitive documents, perhaps she kept evidence, a copy, a note, something to prove what she knew. Hastings, ever practical, began rifling through the desk drawers, finding only stationery and a few personal letters. Nothing here, Poirot. If she had something valuable, wouldn't the killer have taken it? Perhaps, Poirot said, his eyes narrowing as he examined a row of books. One, a worn copy of Persuasion, seemed slightly askew. He pulled it from the shelf, revealing a small envelope tucked behind it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded tightly, its edges yellowed. Poirot unfolded it with care, revealing a typed fragment of a document, its text dense with technical terms: destroyer, specifications, naval deployment schedules, encrypted codes. Hastings, Poirot's voice was sharp with excitement. This is no ordinary manuscript. This is a piece of a government report, hidden here, where only Laura would know to look. Hastings peered over his shoulder, his eyes widening. Good Lord Poirot, this could be treasonous stuff. If Laura had this, she was in over her head. And someone knew it, Poirot said, slipping the paper into his pocket. This document, it is the key to her death. But who gave it to her, or who did she take it from? Their discovery was interrupted by a knock at the door. The constable ushered in Mrs. Higgins, the neighbor, her face flushed with agitation. Mr. Poirot, I remembered something else, she said, clutching her shawl. The night Laura died, I saw that figure in the dark coat, like I told you. But I also heard voices, Laura's and a man's, arguing, just before the fireworks got loud. I couldn't make out the words, but she sounded angry. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A man, Madame, you are certain? Mrs. Higgins nodded. Oh yes, deep voice, sharp like. I thought it was just a lover's tiff, but now, well, I'm not so sure. Thank you, Madame, Poirot said, bowing slightly. You have given us a vital thread. As Mrs. Higgins departed, Hastings turned to Poirot. A man's voice, Marlowe, perhaps? He admitted to arguing with Laura about their engagement. Perhaps, Poirot said, his tone cautious. But we must also consider Monsieur Holt. He knew of the naval plans, and his nervousness, it suggests guilt or fear. And there is Mrs. Carter, who may have known more than she admits. The diaries could point to her, or to another. They left the flat, the weight of their discovery heavy in the air. Poirot paused in the mews, his gaze lingering on the lamppost where Mrs. Higgins had seen the figure in the dark coat. The espionage, Hastings, it complicates the affair of the heart. Laura Grayson was a woman caught in two webs, one of love, one of secrets. We must untangle them both. As they walked toward Poirot's flat, the Bloomsbury streets were quiet, the earlier rain leaving puddles that reflected the gray sky. Hastings glanced at Poirot, whose face was a mask of concentration. You think this naval document is why she was killed? To keep it secret? Poirot's lips curved faintly. I think, mon ami, that Laura Grayson saw too much, and someone love her. Friend or traitor could not allow her to speak. The mirror, the window, the documents, they are pieces of a puzzle, and Hercule Poirot, he will make them fit. The evening closed in, the shadows lengthening as Poirot's gray cells worked tirelessly, weaving the threads of love and betrayal into a pattern that would soon reveal a killer. Chapter 7. The jealous triangle. The fog that had settled over London by the evening of the third day of the investigation was as thick as the secrets surrounding Laura Grayson's death. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat buttoned tightly against the damp, lead Captain Arthur Hastings through the winding streets of Bloomsbury toward the modest studio of Miss Diana Fielding. The air was heavy with the scent of wet coal and the distant hum of the city. A fitting backdrop for the delicate unraveling of human passions Poirot sensed at the heart of this mystery. Poirot, Hastings said, his voice muffled by the fog. This espionage business with the naval plans is all very well. But I can't shake the feeling that Laura's death is personal. That diary entry knows, I'm sure of it. It points to a love affair gone wrong, doesn't it? Maybe Marlowe or Mrs. Carter got jealous. Poirot's eyes gleamed beneath the brim of his Homburg hat. Mon ami, you are not wrong to sense the heart's involvement. Love, it is a flame that warms, but also burns. The naval plans, they are a shadow in the background, but the foreground this affair, this jealousy it is vivid. Nan, we shall see what Mademoiselle Fielding reveals. Diana Fielding's studio, tucked above a bookshop, was a cluttered haven of creativity. Canvases leaned against walls, their surfaces alive with bold strokes and muted shades, while the air carried the faint temps of turpentine and charcoal. Diana herself answered the door, her dark eyes shadowed with fatigue, her hands smudged with paint. She wore a simple smock over a gray dress, her auburn hair pinned loosely, as if she had been working through her grief. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said, her voice soft but steady, "I wasn't expecting you. Please, come in." The studio was lit by a single lamp, casting a warm glow over a half-finished portrait of Laura Grayson, her likeness captured in vibrant oils, her smile radiant, her eyes sparkling with life. Poirot paused before the canvas, his head tilted. "A beautiful tribute, mademoiselle. You were very close to Miss Grayson. Diana's lips trembled, but she nodded. "She was my dearest friend. We met at an art exhibition, and she understood my work, my dreams. I've been painting her to keep her memory alive." Poirot's gaze softened, but his questions were precise. "Your friendship, it was deep, perhaps more than friendship. The heart, it does not always speak in words, but in glances, in silences. Did you love her, mademoiselle?" Diana's hands froze, a charcoal stick slipping from her fingers to the floor. Her eyes, wide with shock, met Poirot's, and for a moment the room seemed to hold its breath. I cared for her deeply," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "More than I should have, perhaps. But she loved Philip Marlowe, and then there was someone else. I saw them together, in secret, near the Mews one evening. I was jealous, yes, but I would never hurt her." Poirot's expression was gentle, but his eyes were unyielding. "This other person, mademoiselle, who was it? A man, a woman? And when did you see them?" Diana sank into a chair, her hands twisting together. "It was a man, tall, in a dark coat. I couldn't see his face clearly, it was dusk, about a week ago. Laura was with him outside her flat, whispering, looking nervous. I didn't confront her, but I couldn't help feeling betrayed." Hastings, standing by the window, glanced at Poirot. "A tall man in a dark coat sounds like the figure Mrs. Higgins saw the night of the murder. Could it be the same person?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone measured. "Mademoiselle, this jealousy you felt, it is a powerful emotion. Did you ever speak to Laura of it?" Diana shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "No, I couldn't. I was afraid of losing her friendship, but she knew something was wrong. The day before she died, she came here, said she was sorry if she'd hurt me. She promised to explain everything soon, but then her voice broke, and she buried her face in her hands." Poirot placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Courage, mademoiselle. Your truth, it helps us. Did Laura mention a document, perhaps something she typed at work? Something that troubled her?" Diana looked up, her brow furrowing. "She did say something odd, now that you mention it. She said she'd seen papers at work that weren't meant for her eyes. Something about ships, codes. She was scared. Said she didn't know who to trust. I thought she was just tired, overworked." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his mind piecing together the puzzle. "Most interesting. Thank you, mademoiselle. You have given us much to consider." As they left the studio, the fog seemed to thicken, wrapping the streets in a shroud that mirrored the mystery. Hastings glanced at Poirot, whose face was a mask of concentration. "She's in love with Laura, isn't she? That jealousy, it could be a motive, Poirot. If Laura was seeing someone else, maybe." Diana snapped. Poirot shook his head. "Nan, Hastings, Mademoiselle Fielding, Her love is genuine, her pain real. She is not our killer, but she has seen a piece of the truth, the man in the dark coat. And her mention of the documents, it ties the heart too. The espionage. We must now revisit Monsieur Holt. They made their way back to Grayson and Holt, where Reginald Holt was locking up for the evening. His nervous demeanor intensified at the sight of Poirot, his spectacles slipping down his nose as he fumbled with his keys. "Mr. Poirot, back so soon. I've told you all I know about Laura." Poirot's smile was disarming, but his voice carried a quiet authority. "Monsieur Holt, a moment more, if you please. Miss Grayson, she typed sensitive documents, naval plans, you said. Did she ever speak of sharing these with anyone? A friend, perhaps, or a lover?" Holt's face paled, his hands trembling. "Sharing? No, never. Laura was discreet. Those plans were a one-time job, sent to us by mistake. I told her to destroy any copies, and she assured me she had." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet, monsieur, we found a fragment of such a document in her flat, hidden carefully. If she destroyed copies, why keep this one?" Holt's mouth opened, then closed, his eyes darting to the side. I don't know. Perhaps she forgot. She was under pressure. You know, long hours, tight deadlines." Hastings, sensing weakness, pressed forward. "Or maybe someone asked her to keep it. Someone who wanted those plans for themselves." Holt's voice rose, almost shrill. "That's absurd. Laura wasn't involved in anything underhanded. If she kept something, it was her own doing." Poirot's gaze was unyielding. "Her own doing, or another's, monsieur? Someone knew what she had, and it cost her life. We shall find out who." As they left Holt's office, the fog had thickened, obscuring the streetlights in a ghostly haze. Hastings glanced at Poirot, his mind racing. "Holt's hiding something, isn't he? He's too jumpy for an innocent man." "Oui, Hastings," Poirot said, his voice soft but firm. "Monsieur Holt, he knows more than he says, but whether it is guilt or fear, I cannot yet say. The triangle Laura, her lover, her jealous friend, it is tangled with the shadow of espionage. The man in the dark coat, he is the link." They paused at the corner, the fog swirling around them like a living thing. Poirot's eyes gleamed with determination. "The heart, it loves and it hates, Hastings, but the mind, it schemes. We are close, mon ami, to the truth that binds them both." Chapter 8. The night of the fireworks. The fog that had enveloped London the previous evening had lifted by the morning of the fourth day, replaced by a brittle clarity that sharpened the outlines of Mayfair's elegant streets. Hercule Poirot, his small frame bundled in a meticulously tailored overcoat, stood at the entrance to Mews Lane, his green eyes scanning the cobbled alley with the intensity of a hawk. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever at his side, shifted restlessly, his breath visible in the crisp November air. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice tinged with impatience. "We've got the naval document, the diary, the man in the dark coat surely. We're close to cracking this. But why are we back here? The flat's been searched to death." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile betraying his amusement. "Mon ami, the scene of a crime, it is like a book, one must reread it to catch the lines overlooked. The night of the fireworks, it was a symphony of chaos, perfect for a killer to play their note unheard. We shall recreate that night, Hastings, and see what shadows move." Inspector Japp, summoned by Poirot's request, arrived with his usual bustle, accompanied by Mrs. Evelyn Carter, Mr. Philip Marlowe, and Miss Diana Fielding. The trio, each bearing the weight of suspicion, stood uneasily in the mews, their faces pale against the backdrop of the grey stone buildings. Japp, his notebook tucked under his arm, looked skeptical but resigned. "All right, Poirot, you've got your audience. What's this about? You said you wanted them here to reconstruct the evening. Sounds like theatrics to me." Poirot's eyes gleamed with purpose. "Theatrics, Inspector? Nan, It is method. The murder of Miss Laura. Grayson was staged with Carashot masked by fireworks. A revolver placed to suggest suicide, a mirror to guide the killer's aim. We shall place each person where they claim to have been, and the truth, it will reveal itself. He turned to the group, his voice calm but commanding. Madame Carter, Monsieur Marlowe, Mademoiselle Fielding, you have each told us where you were on the night of November 5th. Let us test your accounts. Madame Carter, you were at a party in Chelsea. Evelyn Carter, her silk scarf fluttering in the breeze, nodded vigorously. Yes, Mr. Poirot, at the Thompsons' house, across town. Dozens of people saw me there, dancing and watching the fireworks. Poirot inclined his head. And you, Monsieur Marlowe? You were in your chambers, working late. Marlowe's jaw tightened, his dark eyes narrowing. As I told you, my clerk confirmed it. I was drafting a brief until nearly midnight. And you, Mademoiselle Fielding? Poirot's gaze softened as he turned to Diana, whose hands trembled slightly. You were alone in your studio, painting. Diana nodded, her voice barely audible. Yes. I didn't leave until the next morning. Poirot clapped his hands together, the sound sharp in the quiet mews. Bon. Let us begin. Hastings, you will stand at the lamppost where Mrs. Higgins saw the figure in the dark coat. Inspector, please take the place of Mrs. Higgins. At the steps of No. 14. I shall be inside, at Miss Grayson's desk. They moved into position, the group dispersing with a mix of reluctance and curiosity. Hastings took his place by the lamppost, his tall frame casting a shadow across the cobblestones. Jap, grumbling under his breath, stood at the steps, his eyes scanning the mews. Inside the flat, Poirot sat at the desk, facing the mirror, his reflection staring back with uncanny clarity. The window, now closed, offered a clear view of the lamppost outside. Poirot called out, his voice carrying through the open window. Hastings, can you see me clearly? Hastings squinted, adjusting his position. Yes, Poirot, perfectly. The mirror reflects you right to the window. Anyone standing here could see exactly what you're doing. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. And the fireworks, they would light the mews intermittently. A shot, timed with a burst, would be lost in the noise. Jap, from the steps, called up. Mrs. Higgins said she heard voices before the Screeman argument, she thought. Could you hear anything from there, Poirot? Poirot leaned toward the window, his ears straining. With the window open, voices would carry an argument. Apply Mrs. Higgins heard a man's voice, deep and sharp. Monsieur Marlowe, perhaps. Marlowe, standing nearby, bristled. I told you, I was in my chambers. I didn't argue with Laura that night. Evelyn Carter, her voice sharp, interjected. And I was at a party, Mr. Poirot. I couldn't possibly have been here. Diana remained silent, her eyes fixed on the ground, her hands clenched tightly. Poirot descended the stairs, rejoining the group in the mews. Let us consider the sequence, he said, pacing slowly. Laura is at her desk, writing a letter. The window is open, the mirror reflecting her every move. A figure stands at the lamppost, watching. A shot is fired. Timed with the fireworks. The killer enters through the window, or the door places the revolver in her hand, spills the wine to suggest a struggle, and locks the window before leaving through the door. Jap frowned, scratching his chin. That's a lot of maneuvering. Poirot. And the door was locked when Mrs. Higgins tried it. You're saying the killer had a key? Precisement, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. A key, or access to one. Someone close to Loris, someone trusted. But there is more. The naval document we found, it suggests a motive beyond jealousy. Someone wished to silence her knowledge. Not just her heart. He turned to the group, his gaze piercing. Madame Carter, You knew of Laura's affair, did you not? Her diary mentioned Anne, who feared exposure. Evelyn's face flushed, her scarf twisting in her hands. I told you, I don't know what she wrote about. If she had an affair, she kept it from me. And you, Monsieur Marlowe? Poirot continued. Your engagement was secret, but Laura wished to make it public. Did this cause you fear of scandal? Marlowe's voice was cold. I've answered that. I loved Laura, but I wasn't ready to announce anything. I didn't kill her. Diana's voice, barely audible, broke the tension. She was scared, Mr. Poirot. She told me about the papers, said they were dangerous. I didn't understand. But I should have listened. Poirot's gaze softened, but his mind was relentless. Mademoiselle, your love for Laura, it blinded you to her danger. But you saw the man in the dark coat. Was it Monsieur Marlowe? Diana hesitated, her eyes flickering to Marlowe. I don't know. It was too dark to be sure. As the group stood in the mews, the air grew heavy with unspoken truths. Poirot's eyes darted to the lamppost, then to the window above. The killer, they watched from there. He said, pointing. They knew Laura's habits, her secrets. The mirror was their eye, the fireworks their shield. We are close, Hastings. To the moment when the curtain falls. Jap, sensing the tension, clapped his hands. Right, that's enough for now. I'll check alibis again, Poirot, but I need hard evidence, not mirrors and theories. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Evidence, Inspector, is in the details. And Hercule Poirot, he sees them all. As the group dispersed, the mews fell. Silent once more, the lamppost standing like a sentinel over the secrets it had witnessed. Hastings glanced at Poirot, whose face was a mask of determination. You're sure it's one of them, aren't you, Boudou? Poirot's voice was soft, almost a whisper. The heart, Hastings, it betrays itself in time. And time, it is running out for our killer. Chapter 9. The secret revealed. The late afternoon light cast a golden hue over Mayfair, softening the stark lines of Mews Lane as Hercule Poirot and Captain Arthur Hastings stood once more before the fateful window of No. 14. The air was crisp, carrying the faint temps of coal smoke, and the cobblestones glistened from an earlier drizzle. Poirot's small frame was a study in stillness, his green eyes fixed on the window above, as if willing it to divulge its secrets. Hastings, shifting restlessly beside him, broke the silence with a question that had been gnawing at him. Poirot, he said, his voice low, we've got the naval document, the man in the dark coat, and this tangled mess of love and jealousy. But how do we pin it down? Marlowe's got his alibi, Mrs. Carter's story holds up, and Diana, well, she's too heartbroken to be a killer, isn't she? Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile betraying his amusement at Hastings' earnestness. Mon ami, the heart, it is a labyrinth, and even the most broken heart may conceal a motive. But you are right. We are close, very close, to the truth. The mirror, the window, the document, they are threads in a tapestry, and today we shall weave them together. Inside, flat to be, the room felt colder, its emptiness a stark reminder of Laura Grayson's absence. The desk, now bare, save for the faint outline of the spilled wine stain, seemed to mock their efforts, but Poirot's gaze was drawn to a small drawer he had overlooked in previous searches. It was locked, its key missing, but a subtle irregularity. In the wood caught his eye a faint splinter, as if the drawer had been forced open and then carefully closed again. Hastings, Poirot said, his voice sharp with anticipation. Fetch the constable. We must open this drawer. The constable, a young man with a nervous air, arrived with a small toolkit, and under Poirot's watchful eye, pried open the drawer with minimal damage. Inside lay a bundle of letters, tied with a faded ribbon, their edges yellowed with age. Poirot untied the ribbon with delicate precision, revealing a series of handwritten notes, their ink faded but legible. The signature at the bottom of each was unmistakable. Charles Carter. Hastings' eyes widened. Charles Carter. That's Mrs. Carter's late husband, isn't it? These must be old love letters. Oui, Hastings, Poirot said, his fingers tracing the words. But not to Mrs. Carter. These are addressed to Laura Grayson, written years ago, before Charles Carter's death. Listen, he read aloud, his voice soft but clear. My dearest Laura, our love must remain our secret, for Evelyn's sake and for mine. But know that my heart is yours, always. Hastings let out a low whistle. Good Lord, Poirot, Laura was having an affair with Evelyn's husband. That's explosive. If Mrs. Carter found out, it could ruin her socially. Poirot's eyes gleamed with the thrill of discovery. Precise. The diary's It is Evelyn Carter, who knew of Laura's past with her husband. This secret, it is a motive as old as time. Betrayal, shame, the fear of scandal. But there is more. These letters, they were hidden, yet not destroyed. Why keep them, unless Laura meant to use them? He turned to the constable. Please, summon Inspector Japp and Mrs. Carter. We must speak with her at once. While they waited, Poirot paced the room, his mind racing. The naval document, Hastings It, complicates the picture. Laura, she was entangled in two secrets, one of the heart, one of the state. The killer, they struck to silence both perhaps, staging the suicide to hide their true intent. Japp arrived, his face flushed from a hasty journey, with Evelyn Carter in tow. The widow's elegance was strained, her silk scarf replaced by a tightly knotted shawl, her eyes darting nervously. As she entered the flat, Mr. Poirot, Inspector, what is this about? I've told you everything I know. Poirot's smile was gentle but unyielding. Madame Carter, we have found letters from your late husband to Miss Grayson, written years ago. They speak of a love affair, one you discovered, Nan. The diary, it mentions an who knew a secret. That is you, is it not? Evelyn's face drained of color, her hands clutching the shawl. Letters I don't know what you mean. Laura and I were friends. If there was anything between her and Charles, it was long ago, before he died. Poirot's voice was soft, almost hypnotic. But the past, madame, it does not always stay buried. Laura, she kept these letters, perhaps as a reminder, perhaps as leverage. You feared she would reveal this affair, ruining your reputation in society. And so, on the night of the fireworks, you stood at the lamppost, watching through the mirror. You fired the shot, timed with the fireworks, through the open window. You entered, placed the revolver in her hand, spilled the wine to suggest a struggle, and locked the window with a spare key before leaving through the door. Evelyn's eyes widened, her breath catching. That's preposterous. I was at a party in Chelsea, as I told you. Dozens of people saw me. Japp, frowning, interjected. We've checked Poirot. Her alibi holds guests, confirmed she was there until after midnight. Poirot's gaze did not waver. An alibi, Inspector, can be arranged. Madame Carter, you are a woman of charm, of influence. A brief absence from a crowded party, it could go unnoticed, especially with the distraction of fireworks. You had a key to Laura's flat, did you not? A relic of your friendship, perhaps. Evelyn's composure cracked, her voice rising. I had no key, and I didn't kill her. Yes, I knew about her and Charles. It broke my heart when I found out, years ago, but I forgave her. I wouldn't throw away my life for an old scandal. Poirot nodded, his expression inscrutable. Perhaps, madame, but there is another secret. Naval document Laura hid. Did you know of it? Did you fear she would expose more than your past? Evelyn's hands trembled, but she shook her head. I know nothing about any document. Laura never mentioned it. Japp, growing impatient, stepped forward. Poirot, this is all very dramatic, but we need evidence, not accusations. If Mrs. Carter's alibi checks out, we can't hold her. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Evidence, Inspector, is in the details. The mirror, the window, the letters, they tell a story. But you are right, we must be certain. Madame, you may go, for now. But the truth, it will not hide forever. As Evelyn departed, her steps hurried. Hastings turned to Poirot. You let her go. You sounded so sure she was the killer. Poirot's eyes twinkled. I am sure of the motive, Hastings, but not yet of the hand. The letters, they confirmed the jealousy, the betrayal. But the naval document, it suggests another layer, one we have not fully uncovered. We must look closer at Monsieur Holt, and perhaps at Mademoiselle Fielding's mysterious man in the dark coat. They left the flat, the mews quiet, under the fading light. Poirot paused, his gaze lingering on the lamp-post, its shadow stretching across the cobblestones. The secret, Hastings, it is revealed, but not complete. The heart and the state are entwined, and the killer, they walk among us, believing they are safe. But Hercule Poirot, he is not so easily deceived. Chapter 10, the final piece. The twilight of the 5th day of the investigation draped Mayfair in a soft violet haze, the air sharp with the promise of an early frost. Hercule Poirot, his small frame cloaked in a perfectly tailored overcoat, stood in the quiet parlor of his London flat, the fire casting flickering shadows across his polished shoes. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated in a leather armchair, sipped a brandy with a furrowed brow, his mind wrestling with the complexities of the case. The discovery of Charles Carter's letters had ignited a spark in Poirot's grey cells. But the naval document and the elusive man in the dark coat remained tantalizingly out of reach. Poirot, Hastings said, setting his glass down with a clink, we've got Evelyn Carter's motive, jealousy over Laura's affair with her late husband. But her alibi's solid, and this naval document business feels like a different puzzle altogether. Are we dealing with one killer or two? Poirot's green eyes gleamed in the firelight, his fingers steepled before him. Mon ami, the puzzle, it is one, though its pieces are scattered. The heart and the state, they are entwined in this affair. The letters, they reveal a personal betrayal. The document, a betrayal of a nation. The killer, they sought to silence. Both, and in their cleverness, they have left a trail faint, but traceable. He rose, pacing with the deliberate grace of a cat. We must return to the flat, Hastings. There is one detail, a small thing, perhaps, that we have overlooked. The final piece. It waits for us. The mews lay silent under the gathering dusk as Poirot and Hastings approached. No, 14. The constable on duty nodded them through, his lantern casting a feeble glow against the darkening cobblestones. Inside flat to be, the air was cold, the room untouched since their last visit. The mirror above the desk reflected the dim light, its gilded frame a silent witness to the tragedy. Poirot's gaze swept the space, lingering on the wine stain, the empty desk, the bookshelf now missing its hidden treasures. He paused before a small side table, its surface bare save for a single chrysanthemum, its petals curling with neglect. Beneath the table, almost invisible against the dark wood, lay a tiny object, a brass key, its patina suggesting age and frequent use. Poirot's eyes widened, and he knelt to retrieve it, holding it up to the light with a triumphant smile. Hastings, he exclaimed, his voice sharp with excitement. The key. It is not the door key, nor the drawer key. This is something else. A spare, perhaps, to another lock in this flat, or elsewhere. Hastings leaned closer, his curiosity piqued. Another lock. But we've searched everywhere. What could it open? Poirot's fingers traced the key's edges, his mind racing. We shall see, mon ami. But first, let us consider its significance. The killer, they entered and left, locking the door behind them. Mrs. Higgins found it locked, yet the window bore signs of tampering. This key, it may belong to a secret place, a place where Laura hid her final truth. They searched the flat with renewed vigor, testing the key against every lock they could find. The desk, the drawers, the wardrobe all yielded nothing. But in the corner, beneath a loose floorboard, Poirot's keen eye detected, they found a small metal box, its lock a perfect match for the key. Inside lay a single item, a roll of microfilm, its tiny frames glinting in the lamplight. Poirot's breath caught. Microfilm, Hastings. This is no ordinary document. This is the naval report, condensed, hidden for safekeeping or for betrayal. Hastings' eyes widened. Microfilm. That's spy stuff, Poirot. Laura wasn't just typing those plans. She was copying them. But why? Was she working for someone? Poirot's expression was grave. Or against someone, Hastings. This microfilm, it is the final piece. Laura, she discovered a plot, perhaps through her work, perhaps through her lover. She kept this as proof, and it cost her life. They summoned Inspector Japp, who arrived with his usual bustle, his face a mix of skepticism and curiosity. Microfilm, Poirot, you're telling me this typist was mixed up in espionage? That's a tall order. Not so tall, Inspector Poirot said, holding up the roll. This contains the naval plans Laura typed, but in a form meant for secrecy. Someone her killer knew she had it. The murder, it was staged as suicide to distract from this theft. Japp frowned, rubbing his chin. So you're saying the killer shot her to get this microfilm, but they missed it. Then why stage the suicide at all? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Because, Inspector, the killer believed they had succeeded. They took a decoy, perhaps, or thought Laura had no other copies. But the microfilm, it was her insurance, hidden where only she would look. Hastings, warming to the theory, interjected. But who, Poirot? Marlowe's got his alibi, Evelyn's checked out, and Diana, well, she's too broken up to be a master spy. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The alibis, Hastings, they are like the fog we walked through, thick, but not impenetrable. Evelyn Carter. She had motive to silence Laura's scandal, but also opportunity. Her party, it was a crowded affair, easy to slip away unnoticed. And the microfilm, it connects to her late husband, Charles Carter, whose connections may have led to espionage. He turned to Japp. Inspector, we must confront Madame Carter again, but with care. The microfilm, it is evidence of a larger plot. We must also investigate Monsieur Holt further. His nervousness, it suggests he knew of the plan's importance. They found Evelyn Carter at her townhouse, her elegance now frayed by the strain of the investigation. She received them in her drawing room, her hands twisting a string of pearls, her eyes wary. Mr. Poirot, Inspector, this is becoming unbearable. I've told you I was at the party. What more do you want? Poirot's voice was soft but relentless. Madame, we have found a microfilm in Laura's flat, hidden with a key. It contains naval plans. She typed plans that could endanger the nation. Your late husband Charles had connections in government circles, did he not? Did you perhaps use Laura to obtain these plans, only to silence her when she threatened to expose you? Evelyn's face crumpled, her composure shattering. No, I swear, I knew nothing of any microfilm. Yes, Charles worked with government officials, but that was years ago. Laura and I, we had our differences, but I didn't kill her. Japp, sensing weakness, pressed forward. Then explain the letters, Mrs. Carter. You knew about Laura's affair with your husband. That's motive enough for murder. Evelyn's voice rose, trembling with emotion. I knew, yes, and it hurt me. But I didn't kill her. I was at the party? Ask anyone. Poirot's gaze was unyielding. A party, madame, is a perfect alibi for a brief absence. You stood at the lamppost, used the mirror to aim, fired through the open window. You entered with a spare key, staged the suicide, and returned to your party unnoticed. Evelyn collapsed into a chair, sobbing. I couldn't. But I knew she had something. Paper's secrets. She taunted me with them, said she'd ruin me if I didn't help her. I refused, and now she's dead. Jap, moved but resolute, signaled to the constable. Mrs. Carter, you'll need to come with us for further questioning. As Evelyn was led away, Hastings turned to Poirot, his eyes wide. You've got her, Poirot. The letters, the microfilament, all points to her. Poirot's expression was somber. Perhaps, Hastings. But the microfilament suggests a larger game. Evelyn, she killed for jealousy, but also to cover a theft of secrets. We must confirm her movements, and we must find the man in the dark coat, for he may yet hold the final thread. The night closed in, the mews silent under the stars. Poirot's grey cells worked tirelessly, piecing together the final fragments of a puzzle that spanned love, betrayal, and treason. Chapter 11. The confession. The morning of the 6th day broke with a brittle clarity. The sky above Mayfair, a pale blue that belied the dark secrets unraveling below. Hercule Poirot, his small frame immaculate in a pinstriped suit, sat in the austere interview room of Scotland Yard, his green eyes fixed on Evelyn Carter. The widow, her elegance now diminished by the strain of custody, sat across from him, her hands twisting a crumpled handkerchief. Inspector Japp stood by the door, his notebook open, while Captain Arthur Hastings, seated beside Poirot, watched with a mix of anticipation and unease. The room was stark, its grey walls and single-barred window offering no comfort. Evelyn's face, pale and drawn, bore the marks of sleepless nights, her once vibrant eyes dulled by fear. Poirot's voice, when he spoke, was gentle but carried the weight of inevitability. Madame Carter, he began, his tone soft as velvet, we have reached the moment of truth. The letters from your late husband to Laura Grayson, the microfilm of naval plans, the mirror that watched her final moments, these are the threads of a tapestry you wove. Will you not tell us the whole story? Evelyn's lips trembled, her handkerchief pressed tightly to her mouth. Mr. Poirot, I've told you, I was at the party. I didn't kill Laura, I couldn't. Poirot's gaze was unyielding, his fingers steepled before him. Madame, let us consider the facts. You knew of Laura's affair with your husband, Charles, years ago, a secret that could ruin your standing in society. Laura, she kept those letters, perhaps as a shield, perhaps as a threat. And then, there is the microfilm proof of naval plans she typed, plans that could fetch a high price in the wrong hands. You, with your husband's old connections, knew their value, did you not? Evelyn's eyes widened, a flicker of panic crossing her face. I knew nothing of any microfilm. Laura never mentioned it. Yes, I found out about her and Charles after he died. I found a letter in his things. It broke my heart, but I forgave her. We were friends. Hastings, unable to contain himself, leaned forward. Friends don't threaten to expose each other. Mrs. Carter. Laura's diary said E knows, and she was scared. You wanted her silenced, didn't you? Evelyn's voice rose, sharp with desperation. No, I swear, I didn't want her dead. She came to me, a month ago, said she had papers, important ones. She wanted my help to do something with them, said it would make us rich. I refused. I told her it was dangerous, that she was playing with fire. Poirot's mustache twitched, his eyes narrowing. And yet, madame, she was burned. On the night of the fireworks, you stood at the lamppost in Mews Lane, watching through the mirror. You fired the shot, timed with the bursts, through the open window. You entered with a spare key, a key you had from your days of friendship placed. The revolver in her hand spilled the wine to suggest a struggle. and lock the window before leaving through the door, locking it behind you." Evelyn's hands shook, tears streaming down her face. No, you're wrong. I was at the party. I didn't have a key." Jap, his patience thinning, stepped forward. "Mrs. Carter, we've checked your alibi again. Several guests at the Thompsons' party said you disappeared for about half an hour, said you stepped out for air. That's enough time to get to the Mews and back, especially in a taxi. And we found a spare key to Laura's flat in your handbag, hidden in a secret pocket." Evelyn's face crumpled, her shoulders sagging, as if the weight of the truth had finally broken her. I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Laura, she was going to tell everyone about Charles, about the letters. She said she'd ruin me, said I owed her for what I'd done to her career, keeping her out of society. And then she showed me the microfilm, said she'd sell it to a foreign agent unless I helped her. I couldn't let her destroy everything." Poirot's voice was soft, almost sorrowful. "And so, madame, you planned her death. You used the mirror to watch her, the fireworks to mask the shot. You staged the suicide to protect your reputation and to cover your theft of the microfilm." Evelyn's sobs filled the room, her words tumbling out in a rush. "I only meant to scare her, to take the microfilm and destroy it. I stood outside, yes, with a revolver I'd taken from Charles' old things. I saw her through the mirror, writing that letter. The fireworks were so loud, and I fired. I didn't think it would hit her, not really, but then she fell, and I panicked. I climbed through the window, used the key to lock it after, and put the gun in her hand. I thought it would look like she'd done it herself." Hastings, his face pale, murmured, "Good Lord, Poirot. She staged it all, just as you said." Jap, his expression grim, nodded to the constable at the door. "Mrs. Evelyn Carter, you're under arrest for the murder of Laura Grayson. We'll need a full statement." Evelyn, her tears spent, looked up at Poirot, her voice a whisper. "I loved Charles, Mr. Poirot. I couldn't let her tarnish his memory, or mine. And the microfilm. I thought if I took it, no one would know." Poirot's gaze was somber. "The heart, madame, it leads us to dark places. You sought to protect your pride, but in doing so, you betrayed your soul." As the constable led Evelyn away, Jap turned to Poirot, his face a mix of admiration and exasperation. "You've done it again, Poirot. Wrapped it up neat as a parcel. But how did you know it was her, not Marlowe or Holt?" Poirot's smile was faint, his eyes distant. "The mirror, Inspectorate, was the eye of the crime. Only someone who knew Laura's habits, who had access to her flat, could use it so." "Precisely. The letters gave the motive, the microfilm the larger scheme. Evelyn, she was the only one who stood at the intersection of both." Hastings, still processing the confession, shook his head. "But what about the man in the dark coat? Mrs. Higgins and Diana both saw him." Poirot nodded. "A loose thread. Perhaps a confederate, someone Evelyn contacted to sell the microfilm. We must leave that to you, Inspector, to pursue. But the murder, it was Evelyn's hand alone." As they left Scotland Yard, the city was quiet, the earlier frost giving way to a soft evening mist. Poirot's steps were measured, his mind already turning to the next puzzle, though none awaited. Hastings, walking beside him, ventured a final thought. "It's a sad business, Poirot. All that jealousy, all that scheming for what?" "For pride, Hastings," Poirot said softly, "for secrets that could not be borne. But the truth, it always finds its way, and Hercule Poirot, he is its guide." Chapter 12. The order restored. The evening of the 6th day settled over London with a gentle calm, the sky above Mayfair aglow with the soft pinks and purples of a late autumn sunset. The distant crackle of fireworks, a lingering echo of Guy Fawkes night festivities, punctuated the air. but their brilliance now seemed a mere backdrop to the resolution of a darker drama. Hercule Poirot, his small frame wrapped in a meticulously tailored overcoat, strolled through the quiet streets alongside Captain Arthur Hastings, whose face bore the relief of a man who had seen a storm pass. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice lighter than it had been in days. "You've done it again. Wrapped up the case with that uncanny knack of yours." Evelyn Carter's confessionate was like watching a curtain fall on a tragic play. Poirot's green eyes twinkled, though his expression remained somber. "A tragedy, oui mon ami, but one of human making. The heart, it drives us to love, to hate, to destroy. Madame Carter, she sought to guard her pride and her secrets, but in doing so, she unraveled her own life." They paused at the entrance to Mews Lane, the cobbled alley, now peaceful under the fading light. The window of No. 14 flat to B stood dark, its curtains drawn as if to shield the memory of Laura Grayson's final moments. Poirot's gaze lingered on the lamppost where Evelyn had stood, the mirror's reflection guiding her fatal shot. "The order, Hastings, it is restored," he said softly. "The truth, it is like the stars hidden by clouds, but always there, waiting to be seen." Hastings adjusted his hat, a faint smile playing on his lips. "You make it sound so simple, Poirot, but that microfilm business, there's more to it, isn't there? Inspector Japp's still chasing that man in the dark coat. Do you think he was part of Evelyn's scheme?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his mind still turning over the puzzle's final edges. "The man in the dark coat, Hastings, he is a shadow we have not fully illuminated. Perhaps a contact for the microfilm, a foreign agent who tempted Evelyn with promises of wealth. Japp, he will pursue that thread, and I have no doubt he will find answers. But for Laura's death, the hand was Evelyn's, driven by jealousy and fear." They walked on, the city's hum a quiet counterpoint to their thoughts. Hastings glanced at Poirot, his curiosity undimmed. "What about Diana Fielding? Poor girl, she was in love with Laura, wasn't she? Must be heartbroken." Poirot nodded, his expression softening. "Mademoiselle Fielding, she loved with a pure heart, but love, it blinds as much as it reveals. Her pain, it is genuine, and she will carry it long. But she is innocent of this crime, Hastings. Her sketches, her tears, they spoke the truth." As they reached Poirot's flat, the warm glow of its windows beckoned. Inside, a fire crackled in the hearth, and Poirot's valet, George, had prepared a tray of hot chocolate, its rich aroma filling the room. Poirot settled into his favorite armchair, his small hands cradling the cup with a reverence reserved for the finest delicacies. "Hastings," he said, his voice reflective, "this case, it reminds us that the human heart is a complex thing. Laura Grayson, she was caught in a web of love and secrets, her life a canvas painted with passion and betrayal. Evelyn Carter, she sought to erase that canvas, but in doing so, she drew the eye of Hercule Poirot." Hastings chuckled, sipping his chocolate. "And what an eye it is, old chap. You saw through the fireworks, the mirror, the staged suicide, every bit of it. I don't know how you do it." Poirot's smile was modest, though his eyes gleamed with quiet pride. "The little gray cells, mon ami, they seek order in chaos. They see the pattern where others see only shadows. And in Mews Lane, the pattern is complete." Outside, a final firework burst in the distance, its light fleeting but brilliant. Poirot raised his cup, as if toasting the resolution of the mystery. "To the truth, Hastings, and to the order it restores. May we always find it, no matter how dark the night." Hastings raised his own cup, his grin warm. "To the truth, Poirot, and to you, for finding it." The fire crackled, the city settled into its evening rhythm, and in the quiet of Poirot's flat, the world felt, for a moment, perfectly in balance.